What's going on, guys? Welcome to episode number 15 of the Gamefall podcast. Seated right here to my right is the one and only John McVeigh. I am Kyle Sherman, and the dog you hear whining is the one and only Lily. And any noise you hear outside is construction. They're doing the roof across the way from you. It's just literally directly out the window behind the camera. So fun things. You'll hear a little bit. Hopefully not too much, but it's
you're gonna hear stuff.
Yeah, there's noise. But you know what? This isn't a professional operation, so we can't deaden all that sound.
Sorry.
We are going to be covering a special topic today. We mentioned it a little bit in the previous episode. We actually discussed it quite a bit in the previous episode. But you know what? We're doing the full-blown spoiler cast today for Spider-Man, Marvel's Spider-Man on the PS4. I gave John some homework after our last episode and told him to get his ass in gear and just beat the thing so we can talk about it in full. So that is what is coming down the pipe today. John?
Yes. Sorry.
You can speak.
I was super excited.
I've been speaking nonstop.
Spider-Man. It's amazing. And speaking of amazing, do you know what else is amazing about Spider-Man?
What is amazing about Spider-Man?
Marvel's Spider-Man is the fastest selling PlayStation exclusive of all time.
Look at you just segueing right into that first news story. It's an appropriate topic here as we discuss Spider-Man PS4.
By our man Nick Santangelo.
Dude's everywhere. So Nick Santangelo on IGN posting on the 20th of September. Hello. Can't talk. It's early in the morning in case you didn't know. It's when we're shooting this. But Nick Santangelo says, with 3.3 million copies sold within the first 3 days of its release, Insomniac Games' Spider-Man for PS4 is the fastest selling first-party PlayStation game of all time. Now, John, yes. I question that. Is it really first-party or is it a second-party game?
Well, since Sony owns Spider-Man...
But not Insomniac Games.
I'm going to say they paid Insomniac, which makes it...
a first-party game.
A first-party game, even though it's a second-party studio.
Yes.
Because they don't own Insomniac.
Sorry to question your stuff there, Nick. But 3.3 million copies, or about $198 million in the first 3 days.
Yes.
That's insane.
I think it also says they had about $1 million of sales in pre-orders. So that means that 2/3 of that number happened in the 3 days after, which I was part of that because I went and bought it the day it came out. Because I had no internet, so I couldn't download it.
Yeah, and he goes on to say 1 million pre-order copies, and according to Santangelo, Sony Global Senior Vice President of Sales Stephen Turvey said about the success of the game, quote, "Our expectations are always set at the highest levels. Bringing Spider-Man back to gaming in a way that you want to experience." He just praised the way that Insomniac carried out this vision, saying, "It met and exceeded all expectations. I think the company and the campus and our fans are super proud of it." And I mean, it's been the fastest selling game in the year in the UK, and critically loved
everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, IGN I think gave it an 8.7, which is more on the lower end of reviews.
Atrocity to mankind.
So yeah, I mean, having beaten the game, and now that you've beaten the game, and there's a dog whining here. Do you think all that success is warranted? Because I think it's more than warranted. It's been it was a fantastic experience that left me wanting more immediately. Mm-hmm. And it essentially sold itself, the DLC itself, where I was like, I want it, I need it. When's it coming out? October is
next
the answer.
month.
Which is, this video will probably be coming out right at the start of October, so,
Hey, look for it.
Yeah.
Look for the DLC.
So with that, John.
Yes, Kyle.
Let's talk spoilers. Let's talk Spider-Man PS4 in all of its glory, not just a
If you haven't beat it, please leave now.
Yes, this is your last chance. We're going to get into some spoilers here as John takes care of his dog. But So if you haven't completed the game, this is the best time to tune out. I'm going to ramble here for a few more moments as John sorts things out. Spoilers ahead. We're going to be discussing the story,
Let's just
potential implications for a sequel, and all the above. We'll even recap a little bit what we talked about last week, especially John, as you got into the more difficult fights. I want to know more about what you thought of the fighting mechanic. So, with that, John, I kind of led the way last week, having beaten the game. You get to kick things off. What's the first thing you want to talk about here with Spider-Man PS4?
You're putting me on the spot.
You were about to say something, and I interrupted you, and then I literally gave you a platform 5 seconds later.
We're gonna go right to the end, because that's what I want to talk about. The end, specifically when Spider-Man is about to go fight Dr. Octavius, and he's like, I don't know if I can win, and MJ's like, maybe you need help from Peter, and he kind of gives her this like, what the are you talking about look, and then he goes back to his lab, and he makes an amazing suit. It was beautiful. I was really upset because every time you get to a cutscene, the suit you're wearing is in the cutscene. And I was not wearing the Spider-Man suit made for the game. So when I got to the cutscene, I was like, what in the heck are you doing putting this suit on my character?
Really, the only instance that I can think of where I saw that it reverted back to the White Spider for the cutscene.
And there were other cutscenes where I could switch the suit in the middle. So I don't know what was... They must have... That was kind of part of the plan, because that suit is the bottom... is like the inside liner of the suit he makes to go fight Dr. Octavius.
Yes, that is indeed the
case. Which is an amazing battle that was kind of confusing in the middle. I didn't really understand that I was supposed to not just sling my little web shooters at him in one section, so I kind of ran around for like 5 minutes.
The section after the initial fight is what you're talking about, and I witnessed this struggle where Doc Ock essentially sets the roof on fire, so you can't touch the ground, and he's just hurling stuff at you nonstop, and John's sitting there trying to like web him, and I'm like, John, just
all this stuff.
Eventually, like after a couple minutes, I'm like, John, just send the stuff back at him. So he figured that out, and then the next time he got to that section, he's like, oh yeah, that's easier.
Yeah. I thought everything was flying at you so fast, I'm like, I'm not going to have time to grab something and throw it at him, because it takes a little while. So I was a little confused about that. The story, though, actually a lot less Spider-Man-y, and quite a bit more Peter Parker, as far as an overall. Like, they just kind of like, Peter is Spider-Man, so they're just like, here's Peter, and here's his life as Spider-Man. And I thought it was really refreshing, particularly showing his struggle to balance helping out Aunt May at Feast, be a mentor to Miles Morales, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, and try and mend his relationship with Mary Jane, who he apparently broke. They had a falling out before the game starts, which you learn about through the progression of the story.
Yeah, a couple months prior at least. I think it was 3 to 6 months, I think, prior.
That's another thing. Great attention to detail in this game.
Ooh, fantastic. But going back to that sort of the story, you mentioned that it is sort of more of a Peter Parker story.
It is.
And I think it was a story not just about Spider-Man, not just about Peter Parker, but about, I guess, trying to find that balance where he wants to be, he's the hero, he wants to help people, but it has come at a toll in his personal life. With work, he struggles to get to work on time, but Dr. Octavius is a little understanding of that. Obviously gives him some leeway, because at the beginning of the game, he's, frustrated with him about that.
Yep. And
stuff like that. Obviously struggling to pay the bills as he gets evicted from his apartment.
As he always is.
Yes. So I think he's struggling to balance, and then the breakup with Mary Jane. So it's clear, even though he's been Spider-Man for 8 years, it's taken a toll on his personal life. And I think a lot of the game is him trying to figure out the balance of things, or embrace, what it is. Because at the end of the game, it's like he has to make this giant sacrifice. Which this is
immensely disappointing.
Yes. And we're in spoilers here, so we're just going to talk about it. So again, this is your last chance for real. I mean, we've said things, but
we already really
this is a really big spoiler. But with him making that decision to not save Aunt May so he can save everybody with the anti-serum
35.
27.
27 is Devil's Breath. 35 is the antidote.
Okay, whatever. I was gonna say the anti-serum. You know, that was a really heavy scene for him where it's like he wants so badly to save the woman that essentially raised him.
He even asks, he goes, what if we use it to save
one person
now? And he goes, well, then we can't make more. So he's really pissed. And he goes to Aunt May, and he's apparently never told her, and she's never found out that he was Spider-Man. And at the end, so he gets up by her bedside and he goes, you're going to be okay, ma'am. We found the antidote. And she goes and looks at Spider-Man and she says, take your mask off. I'd like to see my nephew. Which is like gut-wrenching.
Oh.
Because it's like she knew the whole time and she let him do it anyway. And she understands that he can't save her because he would end up not being able to save all of the people, not just at her shelter, Feast, but the entire city. So she knows that he has this internal struggle, and she's trying to basically tell him, I'm okay with you being Spider-Man, I'm okay with you having to save everyone else, and I'm proud of you. And it's very touching.
But also, for Peter, devastating, because
insanely devastating, and they did a great job showing that, because she's like dying and he grabs the antidote's still in his hand and he like runs to her IV thing to inject it, and he almost gets there and he can't, because he knows that he'd be killing basically millions, because there's millions that live in and around New York. So
yes, I believe there's
1.6 in Manhattan.
I thought it was 8 in Manhattan alone.
And then I looked it up last week on Google, and that was a 2016 census, so there's probably more. And then, but I think it'd probably be more like 8 million walking around New York at any given time. But I think the people that actually have a home on Manhattan, I think it was about 1.6.
Makes sense. Yeah, so I mean, just the end of the game, and I thought the Aunt May thing was an interesting sort of balance, or sort of a antithesis to what happened with Doc Ock, because at the end of that fight, you know, as you start to go down the building, right before you start to go down the building, you know, when you're fighting on the side, you know, Doc Ock tells, you know, Spider-Man, it's like, he calls him Peter, and Peter's like, you knew?
Yeah.
And he's like, he was furious, and like, because this is a man he looked up to as a father type figure, and like he says, you were my hero, you're everything I aspired to be.
Yeah. And
the fact that he knew that and
basically beat the shit out of him multiple times anyway.
Yeah, and just all that, you could just see how, I guess, devastating that was to Peter, that revelation. And so he goes from this fury, it's like, you knew and you didn't say anything, like, and you still want to fight me even though you know who I am and you know how much I worshipped you, and you still want to do this, and, you know, all that. To Aunt May, you know, he says the same thing. She says, I want to see my nephew, and he said, you knew?
Yeah, because he's been trying to lie to everybody. The only person that knew that everybody knew was Mary Jane. Because kind of hard to keep that one.
Which, I mean, that's a whole other thing, but I was going to finish my thought. So you could just see sort of the two different things. Like, with Doc Ock, it just unleashed this fury, all this pent-up, like, disappointment and anger about the way that Dr. Octavius had acted and all that stuff. Whereas Aunt May, when he's like, you knew, it kind of broke his heart, because he had worked so hard to hide it from her. He says, you know, I didn't want you to worry. And she says, I did.
Yeah.
So he didn't want her to worry. He didn't want her to like have concerns about what he was doing, and it kind of broke his heart to know that she knew and she didn't say anything, and that he was worrying her, and the fact that she knew he was this hero but he couldn't save her was the way it came across to me. It was like, so it's kind of opposite reactions: anger versus like heartbreak.
Yeah.
But what were you saying? Oh yes, that was the thing. The whole everybody figuring out or trying to figure out who Spider-Man is, but like Miles Morales, I'm a little disappointed in you.
Right?
Who's the one person that always hangs out with MJ?
Miles.
No, I mean like Miles only ever sees MJ with one other person.
Yeah.
Regularly. That's Peter Parker.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden she's best homies with Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Come on, dude, put 2 and 2 together.
Well, by the end he puts 2 and 2 together. At the end cutscene, which I was driving me nuts because I was like, oh my gosh, this stupid spider keeps showing up in the last half of the game. When is it just gonna bite frickin' Miles so we can have this just confirmed that he's gonna be another Spider-Man? And he bites him, and it's got a number 12 on its back, so it's like, okay, how many of these are there really? Because, this is Insomniac's story, so they can make even more. They could even make an entirely new Spider-Man if they wanted, which would be kind of cool. But I digress.
Well, no, I mean, that brings up a valid point. Like, Insomniac, let's talk about those end scenes.
Yeah.
So,
he basically acknowledges that well, I don't even know if he knew that Spider-Man was Spider-Man, or Peter Parker was Spider-Man, because he goes in and he's like, I have some stuff I want to talk to you about, when they're helping Peter move into his apartment, and at first Peter thinks it's like,
he says, my body's been going through some physical change.
Yeah, so he's like, oh, puberty, which is really hilarious. And then he's like, no, he goes, maybe it's better if I just show you. And Peter's like, whoa, you don't need to, like, show me. And so he jumps and hangs off the ceiling. And he goes, it's weird, right? And Peter kind of gets this coy smile and does the same thing. And he goes, it's not that weird. And so, like, I think Miles kind of had an idea, but also he really trusted Peter Parker at this point as not just a friend, but someone to look up to in the place of his dad dying. And having gone through watching Peter watch Aunt May die, so they have this bond. So he was like, I'm going to share one of my biggest secrets with you. And I thought it was great because there's nothing that irritates me more than 2 Spider-Men trying to do the same thing and they don't know who the other one really is, because it would just be way more helpful.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of said it all. It'll be interesting to see, because damn it, there has to be a sequel.
But I wanted it yesterday when I finished at 1:30 in the morning. I guess technically that's today.
True, earlier today. Yeah, there has to be a sequel. They've just set so many things up. I think, last week I talked about, technically you could end it and it's a complete story. It'd be disappointing. You wouldn't get more of it, but it's technically a complete story. But
yes,
let's talk about the post-credit scene. That was the mid-credit scene you talked about there. Let's talk about that post-credit scene. Norman Osborn.
Oh yeah,
in his penthouse apartment or whatever, condo, whatever, his loft, which I have a hard time calling a loft. It's like 10 times bigger than any place I've ever lived. But
it's more like an entire floor.
It is. It's the penthouse level. He has his own elevator.
And 3 balconies. It's ridiculous.
Earlier in the game, when Mary Jane breaks in to find the
I did not like that sequence.
It was
too slow.
It was. It's slowed down, but you kind of get to figure out what had happened with Harry, which I think that was the big reveal, but you could have done it a little bit more streamlined way. But we know that Harry was not in Europe. He was being treated for a genetic disease that killed his mother, that he shared, and that the GR27, the Devil's Breath, was an attempted cure for that, but ended up kind of becoming a, bioweapon. No other way to say that.
Basically making Mr. Negative.
We saw Mary Jane put on the Green Goblin helmet to
Like
look
a
at the wall.
prototype.
Yeah, a prototype. Same style.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, the Green Goblin hasn't existed in this before.
And there's...
But I'm digressing.
Sorry.
There's a little subtle hints. So she breaks into the lab. That's where the spider was.
Mm-hmm.
Because they had...
That's where he keeps all his big secrets.
Yeah.
Is at his house.
And
like a crazy person.
There was grenades in there as well. Green Goblin style grenades as well. Along with a big tank that you didn't know what was initially.
We didn't even know it was a tank, really. It just looked like... Something big.
Big metal thing. But at the end, Norman goes in. He opens up this tank. The shutters go up. We see Harry.
Yeah, he's in this green fluid.
But there's these black tendrils in the goop with him.
Which at first I was like...
Okay.
That can't be Venom. Because traditionally, Eddie Brock is Venom. So it's like, what the hell's going on with Harry right now? Is this like some weird like thing keeping his cells from mutating more? And then...
But then, you know, Norman apologizes and, you know, he says we were so close, heartbroken, and then as he puts his head against the glass, a tendril shoots out and touches the glass on the other side, clearly showing that it is indeed the symbiote.
Yeah, so either he's Venom or he's another symbiote, because there's multiple symbiotes in Spider-Man.
I would guess that he's going to be... I'm guessing it's going to be the Venom symbiote.
I think...
Because this is Insomniac's universe. They're obviously going to want to get Venom in there eventually. But what else I loved about that, when he's sitting there talking to Harry in the tank... Excuse me. It's this green goop. And so Norman's sitting there, like, so frustrated, so upset. But his face is green. He's green.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like
green.
the Green Goblin's coming, because I thought that was a piece of foreshadowing that said we're gonna get Green Goblin, we're gonna get Venom eventually. Mm-hmm. I don't know when, and obviously they haven't even announced the sequel yet. But there's no way that Sony
God's Green Earth
and Insomniac
that you do not make a sequel. Sony, get it together.
Exactly. $3.3 million in 3 days. There's no way Sony and Insomniac don't be like, yeah, we're doing that again.
Insomniac's probably like, hey, Sony, so about that budget for the next one. We're going to need a little more money.
Please. But, off the base there, but just the ending just leaves you wanting so much more, and you're like, oh my god, like, I need Green Goblin, I need Venom, like, two of the biggest... you know, villains in the Spider-Man world, the Spider-Man universe. Obviously, the Green Goblin is the longest running, the most iconic Spider-Man villain, arguably.
Almost overused. I was very glad he didn't show up in the first one.
Yeah, same. So, I mean, you have, like, the Sinister Six in this one, which I thought was interesting. I read something online, I don't remember where it was, but they talked about... Sony has desperately wanted the Sinister Six in a Spider-Man thing for a long time.
They teased it in The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
But then they're like, no, we're gonna reboot this stuff, and we get Spider-Man Homecoming, which is a far superior film than either the Amazing Spider-Mans or the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Mm-hmm. But that's not what we're talking about. So you get the Sinister Six, modified Sinister Six in this one. Mm-hmm. You get Martin Lee, Mr. Negative, instead of Mysterio.
Yeah, I was a little upset that Mysterio wasn't actually in the game.
So that's another one we could potentially see again in the future.
Which he's really cool.
But you get, you know, Electro, the Vulture, Doc Ock, the Rhino, Scorpion, and then instead of Mysterio, you have Martin Lee, Sinister Six.
Yes. And none of them are dead at the end of the game, so they can all come back.
Yes, they've just been locked away.
Yeah, basically.
Presumably.
Unless Rhino killed Scorpion. I mean, they got trapped in a tank, so who knows what happened there.
My question is, how did Rhino not break out of that eventually? But it's still a comic book style, you know, game. So there's going to be some unrealism. But I think a sequel's definitely in the works. And if it's Insomniac, I hope they follow their pattern. Trilogies. 3 games.
Oh, yes. 3 games would be
I'm
excellent.
hoping. There's so many things that this game did great. The attention to detail and everything, the tender love and care they show it, but
the fact that Uncle Ben's grave marker and Aunt May's grave marker are 8 years apart. Again, attention to detail. He's been Spider-Man for 8 years, so
Uncle Ben dying is the catalyst to that. So, and then 8 years later, Aunt May dies. Mm-hmm. So that's the 8 years he's been Spider-Man. John, I kind of want to ask you something. The dynamic between Peter and Mary Jane, how did it make you feel? At times where I was a little bit annoyed with Mary Jane, and at times I was like, go get it, girl.
Yeah. So, I'm just going to jump right in and stop you there. I like Gwen Stacy a lot more. Because Gwen Stacy has a brain, and Mary Jane, for the most part, is just, the...
Traditionally, she's just the damsel in distress.
She does do some cool things, like, every once in a while, but she's basically like someone they put in as a role to help show what Peter Parker's struggle is and why he's always fighting to protect. So, like, she's like the metaphor. I know she's a person, but as for the story, she's like the symbol of everything he tries to save. So I understand why to have Mary Jane there as Mary Jane, but they did inject a little bit of Gwen Stacy-ness into her because she was resourceful, tired of being the damsel in distress, wanted to go do stuff on her own, had ideas to help Peter. So it made her a lot more likable to me for what I like in people that, just in general, I like to find I like people that don't want to lay down, like they want to help do stuff, try and better themselves. So yeah, I thought it made her a more well-rounded person as a character.
Yeah, and obviously Insomniac took her in a different direction than she traditionally is. In the comic books, Mary Jane is an actress,
yes,
a model, which we see in the Sam Raimi trilogy. But yeah, in this one they switched things up, so now she's a reporter, and obviously sort of an investigative reporter, wanting to kind of expose all the bad people in the city. But yeah, she's resourceful. Like when you first meet her, she's kind of conned her way into the Wilson Fisk auction thing, and lying to the curator, the person overseeing that, and eventually runs into the demons. But that's not necessarily a damsel in distress moment. She actually saved Peter in that instance.
I was gonna say she was taking care of business when you meet her.
Yeah, so I mean, she's, like you said, resourceful, intelligent. So I thought she was a good companion to Spider-Man. She wasn't there just sort of like distracting him or anything like that. Although, admittedly, in the game, she is a distraction to Peter because he's like, oh, is there hope? Like, obviously he's still in love with her, and by the end we figure out they've kind of patched things up.
Kind of like the Batgirl of the Spider-Verse right now.
But yeah, I mean, I think they talked about it in the game where she says, I don't want to be a sidekick. I want to be your partner. I want to help you. I want to be in this with you.
I want to be the one. I don't want to be eternally being saved. And then she said, I want to be the one saving, something like that, to Peter. So it was interesting.
And as it goes on, you still see the Peter Parker, wants to protect her. You see, he's like, he wants to keep her out of danger, but by the end of the game, he's kind of like, okay, she's not going to do that. She's going to do this. So he's like, by the end, he's like, okay, just be careful.
Yeah, and then, he's like, if you need help, just let me know. And so by the end, they've kind of like gotten through all their kinks and figured out this is what the other person's gonna... They have a better understanding of each other. And, like, she understands he's not just trying to keep her out of harm's way all the time. He's trying to make sure she's not going to get in an area where her life is in danger. And so now that she's knowing that, she's like, well, I want to do these things if I need If I'm in that situation, I'll let you know. And so when the next time she goes to find anything, which is to go see the flat, Norman Osborn's flat, she calls him up before she gets there, and she's like, "Hey, I'm going." He's like, "Okay, let me get a few blocks away.
Let me know if you need help.
In case you need me." And so he's like, "I'm in position," and she's like, "Okay, I'm going."
Yeah, so you see a little bit of an evolution there in their relationship, and it's one that they mutually pick each other up in. So, that makes for a better Spider-Man, a stronger Spider-Man, especially if he has somebody that has his back. Yeah. Which, in the next game, he could have Miles, who now has powers, as well as Mary Jane.
As well as potentially Silver Sable.
Maybe.
And Yuri.
Yes.
His Spider Cop buddy.
Yuri says Spider Cop is needed.
Yes, Spider Cop.
Which wasn't a great honor, So, I mean, story-wise, there's all these things that combine together to make this game great. Now I want to move back to what we talked about a little bit before, and that's the mechanics of the game. The fighting in particular, because the swinging is always going to be the swinging.
So when we first were talking about the mechanics, I was like, the swinging's flawless, they don't need to change it. But I said the combat has room to improve. Well, having gone through the rest of the game and finished it, the combat's immensely satisfying, because there was stuff I didn't realize you could do that you did, and there was things that I was doing that you didn't understand. Because, so I was trying to stay in the air the entire time. And I found,
which is what I did most of the time.
Found ways to do that, but then when I get back on the ground, I'd launch people up and let them fall, and then web them to tie them into the concrete. Kyle told me you can actually slam them into the ground, which is a lot faster. And then the way...
Plus you can take out an extra guy while you do it.
You can take out an extra guy while you do it. You can throw the trip mines on guys, and if they're close enough, half the time they'll actually snap them together and close them, which is actually really cool. We found that out on accident. And there's just lots of secondary uses for all of his items that aren't explained, which is really cool.
Yeah, and it kind of just lets you figure that out on your own.
Yeah.
Which is kind of fun because... And I figured out the trip mine thing just completely by accident because I just happened to have it equipped still.
Yeah.
And, went to hit the right bumper, R1 to web somebody, just with a normal web shooter. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden I threw a trip mine on them, and then it shot out because they were near a wall, and it just pulled them right to the wall.
Yeah.
But then I tried it again, and it stuck them together.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I like this.
Yeah, it's immensely satisfying. I wish, though, when you do run out of ammo for your item you've selected, it's let's say you have the trip mines. There's I only had access to 3 at a time. I wish it would just auto-revert to your web shooters.
Yeah, that'd be great.
While it's charging, and then when it has an availability for you to use one again, it kicks it, so the next time you throw it, it would give you another trip mine. They'd have to do something visually on the screen to let you know that it's popped back and you're able to use it, but it would be nice to still have access to your standard webs.
Yeah, I would say otherwise, or maybe make the standard web shooter a different button than...
You could do that.
Because is L1 used at all?
I
don't think it is. So if you put
I don't think so.
If you kept standard web on R1,
and then you could do
you put your gadget on L1, then you could...
Why isn't that used?
Because it's a secondary gadget. This, he just has the button he has to hit there to do his web shooter.
Yeah.
Whereas the other things are things he has to throw.
I played that entire game and didn't realize that you don't use the L1
Yeah,
button.
I don't think you do.
What?
So, hey, Insomniac, we got ideas. So I think that would be one improvement they could make is maybe keep the gadgets on L1. The only thing you use L1 for is selecting your gadget.
Oh, yeah, it's for the bumpers in the menu. Oh, yeah. Yes,
I mean, in combat, you have to hold L1.
You have to hold L1 to get the wheel up. So maybe if you just tap it...
It would just shoot, yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's been games where you do that, where if you hold it, it pulls up a wheel, but if you tap it, it just does an item.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my preference. Mm-hmm. To keep, like you said, keep those separate so I can use my web shooter anytime I want, because that's something that's always available to Spider-Man.
Yes.
And then your gadget would be on a different button. Or could you put the gadget select on the D-pad? Because you didn't use left, right.
You use down.
Down
for healing.
And up for the camera.
Oh, yes, up for the camera. Yeah, you could do left, right.
But I don't really like to necessarily take my thumb off the joystick in the middle of combat, though. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think L1 would be the trick.
Tapping it.
Yeah. Oh, and holding it for the select.
You could do the touchpad. Don't do the touchpad.
Don't take me out of combat. I don't like that. Anything where I have to, like, pull up a menu in the middle of combat, I dislike immensely. Yeah. Hate it, despise it, however you want to say it. But, it's always interesting to, see how somebody else does those fights, and you're like, oh yeah, I didn't really think about that. Mm-hmm. Like, one ability, because I pushed you through the end of the game, because I wanted to have this in-depth conversation, was you didn't unlock the ability to send rockets back. You can web rockets out of the air and then swing them around. And
yeah, I saw that. That just...
It's helpful at times.
It's helpful, but I just dodged them. And then I tap triangle and I jump to the person, so...
Yeah, and I mean, that, which is perfectly fine, way to go about doing things, but there's just so many different ways, you can do it. Like you said, primarily if there was a big group around me, I tended to, go up in the air. Web bombs was one I didn't use a ton of, which I should have in some of those big group situations where it's a mob around you, but there was other ones I didn't really use a whole lot either. I didn't use the electric web straight up all that much. Most of the time, if I electrocute people, I pulled the electrical box.
Yes, and, which did way more damage.
Yeah, well, and you can hit more people with it, too. Yeah. Like, in the end, like, if there's a big group, you get them all.
Yeah.
I love that there's so many different ways you could do the combat. So if you're a person that wants to do, things on the ground and use those gadgets, you could.
If you're a person that wants to put everyone on a gargoyle, you can.
Batman reference.
Yeah, because it's appropriate. The only thing that was not satisfying was I couldn't cut my webs that I'd done on the gargoyle. It's not really
to drop them
gargoyle. To drop the entire group on one massive pile at the bottom.
I wish you could. Also, my only other complaint too was you couldn't get like multiple guys on one spot.
Yeah, which doesn't make sense to me because you just stick them to the other guy.
But such is life. I figured out ways to get them.
You just go 2 feet, and then you can line them up in a row.
Yeah, but if you're on like a lamppost, sometimes you could.
Really work.
Well, sometimes you could go from one. If it was like the one with the 4 lights on it.
Yeah.
Each direction, you could just hop over to the next one and get somebody.
Yeah.
There was ways around it, but...
And most of the time, when you wanted to do stealth, the people were far enough apart that you just go to one next to them and do it.
Especially in the stealth critical things. Let's talk about something I kind of disliked about the game, and that would be challenges. Mm-hmm. And I don't per se have a problem with challenges in the game, but I do sort of dislike that you have to get perfect on them if you want to potentially unlock everything. I haven't beaten them all. But I'd like to unlock all the suits. I'd like to upgrade all the gadgets. I like to do all that. So, I mean, I like the fact that I can purchase all the skills. I can fill out the skill trees.
Yeah.
I want to be able to get all the suits. I want to be able to upgrade all the gadgets.
Upgrades.
So, it's not so much the challenges. It's making them really difficult. Some of them are fine. Mm-hmm. I can get, 3-star, get that ultimate level... fairly easily, or maybe it takes a couple of tries to get the bombs quick enough. You have to figure out the quickest way to get there, or the drones, same way where you swing through the checkpoints and stuff like that. But it's just, like, the stealth challenges, really hard to get the ultimate level. I think I've only gotten it once on all of them. And that was just, like, one where I was literally just flying around, hitting triangle, just trying to... The higher you get your combo up, the more bonus points you get. But it's hard to get a high combo in stealth because you get 1. You get your combo up to 2, 3, 4.
You have to do the stealth fast in order to get it higher.
Yes, you have to be very quick.
Yeah.
And it's challenging
And
to
so you
stay
have to-
hidden.
Yeah, it takes forever to figure out who to take first and where and how.
Yeah.
There were a couple that I did. I got 3 stars just on accident.
Yeah,
Or
same.
whatever, which was fine. Like, that I think's fair, but, like, the other ones, like, from the first one to the second one's a reasonable jump, and then from, like, number 2 to number 3, it's like you need 40,000 points, and it's just...
There's some that go from like 30 to 70.
Yeah,
it's crazy. And the combat ones, and it's just like, there's one that I did, the one in the northwest corner of the map, up in Harlem, and it was like, I got like within 500 points a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, it was frustrating because I wanted to try to, get that one to the ultimate level. And like, it took me like a bunch of tries because I got so close so many times, but there was just like one guy that I kind of like didn't get right away. There was 2 guys with rocket launchers, and it was just like getting up there. I knocked one guy back when I thought I killed him and I hadn't, and then it like took enough time off, and it was just like, ugh. So that's the only thing that really frustrated me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll probably continue to work at it and all that stuff. But in terms of the number of side missions, the street crime can get a little tedious if you try to do it all at once.
Street crime I just did at random when I felt like it.
Yeah, and that's... At first I went around and did all of them and stuff like that. But at the end, when you have both the prisoners and Sable, it's like that's like 10 more per... thing, and that'd be way tedious. So that one, it was just more swinging around and getting them as they came.
Also, a lot more bases and resource points. Like, all the other point tokens you get way more of than the challenge tokens. The challenge tokens are like, just, at least
It's
opportunities to get challenge tokens are very limited.
yeah.
So maybe they could have kept the difficulty the same there, but like added a couple extra areas of like the brawl challenge and the stealth challenge and all the different variations of the challenge tokens.
Well, I did like how they tiered it. So it's like
Yeah.
if you get the ultimate, you get the 3 for ultimate, you get the 2 for
number 2 and
superior or
and
whatever.
1 for 1.
Yeah. So it's like you end up with 6 if you get them all. So it's like, okay, in that sense, it's not as precious of a commodity, but it's so hard to get those 6.
To get to the
it's easy to get 3.
3 on each. But
it's hard to get 6.
Not the last 3 on each challenge.
Yeah, and that's why when I told you that it's like, okay, if you want to get the trophy for
all the suits,
all the suits, like I said, you should focus on that.
Yeah.
Using your challenge tokens on that as opposed to the
upgrades.
gadget upgrades.
Yeah.
So that was a little frustrating, but no game's gonna be perfect. Even our beloved Mass Effect 2 has its flaws. The planet scanning being the biggest one, and the lack of a Mako.
Yeah, Mass Effect 2 sucks. I'm just gonna put it out there.
It doesn't suck. It's just
It's a terrible game. Should never have been created.
It's a great game. It's just disappointing.
Neither should 3. Actually, 3 is a great game. 2 is amazing. I wanted the last mission on Mass Effect 2 to be like every mission of Mass Effect 3, but it wasn't. Anyway. I think, to sum up my feelings about Spider-Man, it's another one of those games that has to be played. If you like Marvel, if you like Spider-Man, it's a must-get. If you want a good roaming game that's not really gonna get upset if you just play how you want to play, it's another great game for that. It's got lots of variety. The combat's nice. The movement is fluid, and it has a great story. So overall, as a package, it's the real deal.
A+. Yeah, I mean, it literally sort of checks all the boxes as far as what I'm looking for in a game. Great story, fun gameplay. I guess top of the list is fun gameplay.
Okay.
If it can be a stupid story, but if it plays great, I'm gonna play the shit out of it.
Yeah.
Our example being Mercenary Kings.
Yep. Terrible story.
Terrible. No, there is no story. Let's be honest.
It's
just super fun.
Let's get some claw.
And yeah, so I mean, it's got great gameplay. Like you said, the swinging, the maneuvering is fantastic. The combat, you can kind of go about it however you feel like.
Mm-hmm.
There's different aspects of the combat. It's going to challenge anybody in one way or another, but there are ways to make it so it fits your playstyle. It's got a great story. I actually hated having to stop to do side things because I was like, I want to know the next thing. I want to know the next thing. And that's partly why I want to play the DLC. I want more of that story. I need more.
Yes.
Injected in my veins. I mean, those are the big two for me.
Okay.
I mean, as long as it plays great and it's got a great story, I say it's a must play. I don't need multiplayer to be happy. I don't need like horde mode or whatever you want to call it.
Multiplayer would be weird.
Yeah. Although there is a Spider-Verse out there.
You could have like
Spider
Royale.
Don't do it. Don't do it. We're being very facetious. I'm saying this because I want it to be explicitly clear.
It's perfect the way it is. Just make another single player game.
2 of the best games of the year so far.
God
the 2 greatest games of the year so far. Arguably 2 of the greatest games to grace this generation of consoles, specifically the PlayStation 4. God of War, Spider-Man, single-player only games with great stories and great gameplay mechanics.
Sorry, Xbox.
But it's not a flawless game. But it is
not flawless.
No, and no game is flawless. I mean, even in God of War, there's things that frustrated me, challenged me, that sort of thing. But it's the story and the gameplay just trump everything, and both those games did that so great. That's why they're my 2 game of the years so far. Don't ask me to choose between them because they're 2 different games. The tone of this one a lot lighter. It's Spider-Man. He likes to joke. He likes to have fun. God of War, darker, more serious. But it has a couple lighthearted moments. But as far as the games that I've played this year, God of War and Marvel's Spider-Man for the PS4, must plays.
And there you have it.
Must plays. That'll wrap things up for this show. Thanks for bearing with us. There's a couple cuts in here because battery life.
For one.
Battery life is a problem sometimes. But we will get back next week to some more news items. And John's going to talk a little bit about Nintendo Switch Online, which is now out. And he's going to give his thoughts on the first few days of that and his experience so far. So be sure to tune back in for episode number 15. No, 14. No, 16. I can't count.
I'm going to stop doing fingers eventually.
So yeah, that'll wrap things up here for episode 15. We'll be back next week for 16, where we'll have news items and Nintendo Switch Online review. So be sure to tune back in. He's John McVeigh.
He's Kyle Sherman.
We will see you next time.